Kyle Fleischmann left a bar in downtown Charlotte just after 2 a.m. in the morning. He wasn't drunk, he wasn't upset, and he wasn't going anywhere unusual. His apartment was less than half a mile away, and it was a walk that he'd made many times before. Kyle was seen on surveillance cameras walking calmly through the city, and then, without any sort of explanation at all, the cameras stopped seeing him. Kyle Fleischmann was never ever seen again. It's midnight somewhere, and tonight I have a story for you. Kyle Fleischmann was 24 years old. He was responsible, he was reliable, and very, very close with his family. Friends described him as very friendly, very thoughtful, and also a very steady person. He'd recently graduated from college and he was working while he was planning his next steps. There was nothing about Kyle's life that suggested that he would ever want to disappear. He had plans, he stayed in regular contact with his family, and he was expected at work the very next day. Nothing about that night suggested that it would be his last. On the night of November 9th, 2007, Kyle spent the evening at the Buckhead Saloon in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was a very normal night out. He socialized, he had a few drinks. Nothing out of the ordinary was reported. Just after 2 a.m., Kyle left the bar and a friend offered him a ride home, but Kyle declined. And the reason he declined was because his apartment was very close. It was only a few blocks away. The streets were very familiar, and the walk home was one that he'd done many, many times before. So Kyle stepped out into the city alone, and very sadly, that was the last time that anybody knowingly spoke to him. Now, Charlotte was very quiet at that hour. Streetlights illuminated the sidewalks, traffic was light, bars were closing for the night. Kyle was captured on multiple surveillance cameras as he walked away from the Buckhead Saloon. He appeared very, very calm, very unhurried, and he was moving in the direction of his apartment. Nothing about the footage suggested any sort of distress. And then there's a dark stretch of that walk that was never recorded. A short distance, only a few minutes long, and no confirmed footage exists of Kyle in that area. After that point, he never reappears on camera again. Kyle never arrived home. He never contacted his family, and his phone stopped showing activity. Also, his bank cards were never ever used again. There were no confirmed sightings, there were no calls, and there was no messages from Kyle. For somebody who vanished in the middle of the city, the silence was very deafening and very, very complete. Now, when Kyle was reported missing, the search began and police canvassed the area. Friends and family retraced his route. Posters were distributed around the city. Search teams combed nearby wooded areas, construction zones, and also to the surrounding neighborhoods, but they found absolutely nothing and no trace of Kyle. There was no clothing, there was no phone, there was no wallet, and there was no sign of any sort of struggle. And despite the effort, the investigation stalled quickly because there was just simply nothing to follow. There were no leads to go on. Now, the strangest thing about this is that Kyle didn't disappear in a remote wilderness. He vanished in a very populated city. He was taking a short walk on a familiar route on a night with no extreme weather. He was surrounded by lighting, by businesses, and also too lots and lots of surveillance cameras. There was no evidence that he ever planned to leave. There was no sign that he was being targeted, and there was no indication that he ever made it home. And yet, nothing after that moment was ever recorded. Now, as time went on, the case grew colder. Leads came and went, sightings were reported, and then those sightings were dismissed. Kyle's family continued searching, but no definitive explanation ever emerged. No remains were ever found, none of Kyle's belongings ever resurfaced, and no answers were ever settled. Kyle Fleischmann simply vanished off the face of the earth. Kyle Fleischmann didn't disappear in darkness, he disappeared under streetlights on a walk that should have taken minutes in a place where someone should have seen something. But after that final stretch of road, there's only silence. Kyle Fleischmann has never ever been found. So, as normal, let me know down in the comments what you think might have happened to Kyle. And if you like dark stories told at midnight, make sure you're subscribed. And until then, I'll see you at midnight.